Welcome to the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by our lead college football writer, Ryan Barry. Ryan, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. I've developed a new addiction to the game GeoGuessr, where you're put anywhere in the world on a map and you have to guess where you are. I think I might like that more than sports now. Other than that, I'm doing pretty well.
And it's an
I don't know if you've
app.
ever heard of that game, but yeah, it's addictive. But that's just me. Yeah,
And is it free to play or do you have to pay to play?
it's it's free. You'll get a certain amount of games a day, which I max every day. But
Okay. Well, I'm a geography guy, so looks like I'm going to
yeah,
be trying out GeoGuessr because, I have all the available time in the world
of
to
course,
play
right.
games. But yeah, I'm going to have to check it out. Before we get started here, I do want to remind you that we are brought to you by Yolked. If you're looking for a safe and effective protein powder that tastes great and can help boost your workouts, well, Yolked is that product. It's made from real egg yolks, tastes like birthday cake, and only 47 calories. It is also a low calorie protein product. If you are a coach who wants to look into helping your players improve their workouts, or you're a personal trainer, then you can visit yoke.com today. Yoke always has deals available for programs and schools alike. Again, it's a safe and effective product made from real egg yolks and only 47 calories per pack. It is a delicious protein product that you can use every day to bolster your workouts. Visit yoke.com today. All right, so Boston College on a bye last week. UConn on a bye last week. UMass might as well have been on a bye last week. Um, but we're going to get to the Minutemen in a sec. But legitimately, the game of the year potentially in Division I college football in New England might have been played this past Saturday when Dartmouth went down in New Haven and shocked Yale in overtime 44-43 in a game that at one point Yale led, I believe, 30-7. Dartmouth roars all the way back. What a game. And here's, I think, the most impressive thing, Ryan. Dartmouth also did this with starting quarterback Jackson Proctor out. Sophomore Grayson Sonia played in this game. He started in this game, and he had 5 total touchdowns in the win. Unbelievable performance for Dartmouth. They improved to 4-0. This has to be the game of the year. I don't know if we're going to get another game in Division I college football in New England that's going to top this.
No, and we've had some pretty good ones to start already this year. A couple of you've been at, and myself. And when I checked that scoreline midway through the game, I was genuinely shocked because it kind of felt like with the way that the Ivy's gone so far this year, I was thinking this could be Dartmouth's year. The way they're playing, they look good, and the other teams have kind of stumbled out the gate a little bit. And then to storm all the way back like that, win in overtime, I think as defining as a win it is for Dartmouth to do it with the backup, it's kind of one of those for Yale where you're a top 3 favorite to win the league this year. It's not one of those how do you come back from it, but Grant Jordan had 5 touchdown passes. Well, I don't know what more they could do, really. They still played well. The stats are there, but it almost feels like Dartmouth Team of Destiny type vibes when you have a win like that.
Yeah, and winning down in New Haven is never easy. But I will say, I think for Tony Reno's team, their youth and inexperience showed up in the second half of this game. And I think Yale, and I'm not making excuses for them, but I do think Yale is young at some key spots. And I think that inexperience showed up on Sunday. Now, look, Dartmouth, and I said this last week, I mean, you're talking about a senior-laden offense. You look at some of the guys that they had back, Jackson Proctor at quarterback, Hugh Jones at running back, Paxton Scott at wide receiver, Delby Lemieux up front. I mean, they bring back a lot of experience offensively. Defensively, I think Coach McCorkle and the staff knew early on they might have some growing pains replacing some good players at all 3 levels of their defense. But this doesn't surprise me offensively. I thought coming into the season that Dartmouth, Harvard, probably the 2 best offenses in the Ivy League. You could probably make a case for Brown as well, what they had back. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is I just think this Dartmouth team, you're right. I think they have that look of a team of destiny. They're now 4-0. They're in a really good spot. They have CCSU on Saturday at home. They get to 5-0. You still have to play Harvard in a couple weeks, but passing this Yale test is a big, big test for this Dartmouth team. And for them to win this game, I think certainly now they'll have Harvard at home. I think certainly now it puts them in a position where they're going to be tough to beat in Hanover. I mean, they're tough to beat up there, especially as the weather starts to turn here and it gets colder. The game gets more physical. They have been a handful at home in the past at newly minted Buddy Stevens Field. But I definitely think when you look at this game, certainly game of the year in Division I in New England up until this point, and I think it was a statement win for a Dartmouth program that all of a sudden now, you saw it with Buddy there a couple years ago, but since COVID, this Dartmouth program has been really good. They've been in the mix every year with the exception of 2 years ago. Of course, last year they won a share of the Ivy League title, but this was a signature win for Sammy McCorkle in his second year. They needed it and they got it. Kudos to them coming from behind and beating a really good Yale team. Harvard, of course, playing on Friday night on the road at Cornell. 38-20 win. Jaden Craig had a monster game there for the Crimson. He threw for 316 yards and 4 touchdown passes. Swampscott's Xavier Bascon, 23 carries, 99 yards. After losing that tough game to Brown a couple weeks ago, Harvard has since followed it up with back-to-back wins over UNH and Cornell. Safe to say the Crimson are back.
Yeah, and the staple of, I think, their defense that continues to show up year after year is that, that run defense, right? Another solid week, I think overall. And they're just, you go on the road, you have 2 back-to-back Friday Night Lights games, and those can be tough because, to each of those teams, that's one of their biggest games of the year, right? For UNH and, of course, for Cornell to be hosting them. They're off to a tough start, looking to get a kind of defining win to the season. So, I mean, I'm impressed, right? Scott Woods looks great. Cooper Barkate looks great. And again,
Cooper Barkate, I think, is the best receiver in the Ivy League.
Yeah, and Jamison Wang is one of the better.
I don't think that's a stretch.
So it's to be able to, kind of keep him subdued. His stats look pretty good, but overall, not allow them to beat him. Still score 38 points. If I'm Dartmouth and I'm thinking like this, the Harvard game is now your biggest game of the season, and I think vice versa. I think it's both ways.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Harvard game, I don't want to get ahead of myself because as we know,
of course,
Harvard-Yale usually also determines, if not the league, it seems, at least, especially in recent years, if not the league winner, certainly the winner of that game can get a piece of the league. We saw it last year, of course, when the Ivy League was shared 3 ways between Harvard, Yale, and Dartmouth. But yeah, I think the way that Dartmouth and Harvard are playing right now, you can almost make the case that game the first weekend of November up in Hanover could potentially determine the league winner, that the winner of that game will have a 2-game lead over the rest of the field, and as long as they take care of their business, they'll be league champs. We'll see. Brown, of course, lost on Saturday 31-21 to URI in the 43rd annual Governor's Cup game. Brown got off to a pretty good start. They took an early lead. They were able to carry the play early, but URI was able to come back behind the passing and the running of Devin Farrell in that one. The Bears have now lost 2 in a row. For URI, they're 5-1. They have a big one coming up on Saturday. They're going up to Durham to take on the UNH Wildcats. And what is a big game because for URI, they haven't won up there in a long time. But for URI, if they were to go up there and win that game, now the conversation shifts to can they win the CAA? Because it's an at-large playoff bid is certainly in the cards at that point. But now you also have to think about them as a potential legitimate contender to win the CAA. Of course, they haven't made the playoffs since 1985. So if URI somehow finds a way to finally get there this year, it would be huge for the program. But nonetheless, big win to retain the Governor's Cup over Brown.
Yeah, I'm. These games have been exciting, and I think that's one of the best things just for Rhode Island football in general. But what it seems to just keep occurring with Brown is just struggling to get the run game going and finding consistency. I mean, I think URI's got a solid rush defense, but still, and when you don't have that kind of complement, and Jake Wilcox is being held to no touchdown passes, it's going to be a really difficult game to win. But, Devin Farrell's coming along, and I think that's what's important, even though, Malik Grant doesn't have his best game, but the rest of the team kind of picks it up, right? Marquise Buchanan
had a big game. Yeah.
Right. So that's what's important, and I think if you are you take care of these games, because these are the games that, you now want Brown to go out and continue to do well because it helps your resume, I think, especially when you look at those rankings. So this is one of the biggest games you could argue coming up on Saturday in URI. Is it too bold to say in program history it's one of their biggest ever? Because to be able to get over that Durham hump really puts them in the driver's seat for that at-large bid. So
I think you make a great point, and to that I would agree with you. I think that this is one of the biggest pro games in the program's history, at least in the last 30, 40 years.
Right.
I mean, again, we're talking mid 80s the last time they made the playoffs. So if you use that as a barometer, let's say the last 35, 40 years, then yeah, this is certainly one of the biggest games in the program's recent history. And look, they need to win it. I mean, that Hampton game last week, that was the game where this program the last 3 years, they've gone 7-4, but that's usually that week 3 or 4 matchup where they've sputtered, lost a game they probably should have won, and then it affected them on the back end. They didn't do that this year. They showed a lot of resolve in coming from behind to beat Hampton the weekend prior to last. So, you know what? This is a team that's proven that they can win those kind of close games. And we know if you're going to go up to Durham and beat UNH, you better score. You better pack your offense, because we know the Wildcats can score at home. Don't look at what happened last week in that 17-10 win over Elon. That's not a barometer of how good that UNH offense is with Seth Morgan and Logan Tomlinson and Burke and the rest of that receiving core. That's a very good receiving core. It'll be a real test for URI. But if they pass the test and go up there and win, then yeah, I think that big things are ahead, provided they don't trip up down the stretch,
Right.
which obviously is always possible. But I have a feeling that, Jim Fleming's not going to let that happen if they get this one. And I said this to Nick Coit from ABC6 the other day when I saw him at the Patriots. I don't think this is one of Fleming's more talented teams. He's had more talented teams the last few years, but I just think this is a group that is bought in. I think the coaches are coaching their asses off with this group, and I think that's been the difference there for the Rams. Sticking with the CAA, Bryant gets off to a good start on Saturday, falls apart in the second half, loses to Albany 24-17. Discouraging loss to the Bulldogs. You're coming off a big win the week before in Providence against Brown. You would think against a 1-3 Albany team coming to town, you could follow that up with another win. But kudos to Albany. They did a pretty good job of keeping Jared Guest and Landon Ruggieri in check. That proved to be the difference. Fabrice McKendy had a nice game on the ground for the Bulldogs, but unfortunately it wasn't enough.
Yeah, this felt like the game for Albany to kind of save their season. So I do wonder if there was a little bit of desperation, kind of hero ball, because if you lose this game, you're
hero
now
ball. I like the sound of that, hero ball.
Right? Yeah, it's you're really in a hole.
What's the name of the app? Geo Chaser or whatever.
Oh, GeoGuessr. I'm gonna send it to you after. If you like maps, I'm gonna tell you this is gonna knock your socks off. But yeah, but this is a game they need to kind of help their season. So I do feel like the Bulldogs kind of had that against them, but it is the press. It's too bad, especially when you look at the stat line from Albany. It's not like they did anything outstanding. The Bulldogs had 2 interceptions, right? Like they forced a bunch of fumbles, right? But they just weren't able to kind of put the game away. So, that's the youth that we've talked about all season that maybe in a couple of years.
Right. And the turnover on that roster. Again, going into the season, they had over 40 new faces, which in this era of the transfer portal is not a surprise anymore. I mean, it's going to become a game of attrition. You're going to have a lot of turnover year in and year out, but that does factor in. I mean, Jared Guest is a first-year starter. He's had a good year. The Coastal Carolina transfer, he's put up big numbers for them. But again, you got to remember, this is his first year in Chris Merritt's system. And again, we mentioned, yes, they have a lot of familiar faces back. Ruggieri, McKendy, Jeff Woods at left tackle, Mark Taglieri at tight end. All those guys are back, and they're guys that have been key contributors for the program. But nonetheless, you still have a lot of new faces. Maine goes down to Delaware and loses 44-21. Black Bears actually played pretty well in the first half. They were up 14-13 at the half. Unfortunately, a 21-point fourth quarter for Delaware did them in. Nonetheless, the Black Bears are now 3-3. They return home on Saturday to take on Villanova in Orono. Nova's Nova, always one of the better programs in the CAA. It's a blue blood program in the conference. They're coming in 5-1. This is going to be a stiff test for Maine, but a lot of positives to take from that game on Saturday, but giving up 21 points in the fourth quarter, that's a bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah, that one hurts, and especially when monitoring the scores all day, you see Maine keeping it close. I was genuinely like, oh my gosh, like what what a heck of a start for these guys. Like they really are, like this turnaround is really, then of course, it goes the way it does, but you can't throw 3 interceptions. The run game was not what it was. It was not what we had seen kind of growing so far this year. Quiet day for Montego Moss. So it's a tough place to win. The Delaware is probably, because they're going there, but the most FBS ready program in the FCS, right? So it's tough. 2 back-to-back teams each week, I'll tell you, but these are the things that this young team needs to learn.
And as I mentioned earlier, UNH went on the road and beat Elon 17-10. They secured the win thanks to a Duncan Moreland interception with 1:12 left in the game. It wasn't pretty, but a win is a win. And they come back home at 4-2, and they have a big one on Saturday, as we mentioned earlier, against URI. I think a lot of people, when they look at this UNH team, they expect fireworks week in and week out. We know their offensive history and the type of numbers that this offense has put up through the years, whether it was Chip Kelly's spread offense or now more of this West Coast system that they're running now. But nonetheless, not your typical UNH performance offensively, but they got it done. They got the W. That's all that matters.
Yeah, and I think that you can win big, but you can win this way is important, especially after a tough loss to Harvard. I'm still worried about the run game a little bit, right? Isaac Seed, 51 yards, only 2.6 yards a carry. So that's something that I think
that's a good point, Ryan. Their running game's got to get it going. It's got to be better. I mean, I know we were spoiled the last few years with Dylan Lobby, but that running game does need to be better.
Yeah, they're missing that second guy, and I think there's too much on Isaac to try and get the job done. So it puts much more pressure, I think, on Seth Morgan. And luckily they've got that great receiving core, but this is where I worry about end of the year competing for that FCS playoff berth. But they showed they can win ugly on the road, which is important.
It is. And one thing I will say about URI on Saturday, they will run the football. They will commit to running the football. It's a staple of Pat Murphy's offense. But the other thing is they have the backs where they can really cut this thing in half and force UNH to play the game in a crawl. If they can get Malik Grant going early, and they have about 4 running backs that they can give touches to, Gabe Sloat, Deion Silas, Jaden McKenzie, if they can get that running game going and they can control the clock, they can slow this thing down, lean on their ground game and their defense. URI can go up there and win this game. Now, we'll break it down in a minute, but that's something to keep an eye on here, to your point about UNH's inability to run the football. Holy Cross survives against an 0-6 Fordham team. They were losing most of this game. Dan Curran's squad comes from behind to win at 19-16. They have a big test on Saturday when they visit Cambridge to take on Harvard. It wasn't pretty, but all of a sudden now Holy Cross is 2-0 in the Patriot League after beating Colgate the week before, Fordham this week. Are you buying stock on Dan Curran's squad, or are the Crusaders on the way back?
I think it's tough because Fordham was, I thought, supposed to be one of the better teams in the Patriot League this year. And even I think that I wouldn't feel as bad about this close win had Fordham not looked so bad in other games. Like if Fordham was an 0-7 team that was competing every game, they just, there were injuries or something was holding them back, then I'd be like, okay, this is just a good team. But they got blown out by Central Connecticut, right? So like they got torched by Dartmouth. Like this is a team that it just isn't very good, right? But they, as you said last week, right? Whenever Fordham plays Holy Cross, they get up for this game. It's always a tough game. Yeah. So I'm trying to chalk especially it up to that, but I don't know. It's great to see, Jaden Clairvaux run the ball well because, obviously with the injuries they've had at that position, it's really important.
They clearly missed Jordan Fuller. That's abundantly obvious. And they should. I mean, no knock on Joe Pazanski, Justin Shorter in the passing game, but Jordan Fuller was going to be the focal point of that offense. He's one of the best backs in FCS football. And when you lose a guy like that for the season, you're not replacing that.
No. So again, they still have the rest of the Patriot League, which is, is important for them. They could lose to Harvard and they'd still be fine as long as they win out the Patriot League. But if you want any chance of an outside shot, you need to win this weekend, obviously. But definitely a weird game. I was very surprised to see the game play out the way it did.
Yeah, Pazanski in the passing game weren't as good as they usually are, which was also a surprise. Real quick before we wrap up, looking back at last week, a couple of NEC scores. Central Connecticut State back to 500 with a 38-20 win over Mercyhurst, who is in their first year in the NEC. Brady Olson threw 3 touchdown passes in the win for the Blue Devils. Elijah Howard had 20, let me see here. He had 27 carries for 169 yards. Blue Devils, like I said, back to 500. Big win for them.
Yeah, I think what's great about that is you didn't need Olsen to really, I mean, obviously 3 touchdown passes is awesome, but you didn't need him to be the kind of world ender that week when you had, excuse me, Howard running the way he did. It's still a fun season. These are the games that you got to feel good about, even though 20 points to a team like this in transition is tough, especially when your defense has shown that you could be better in other weeks, but still it's an impressive, win that they keep rolling. And, Olsen really seems to kind of be finding his groove even more on the offense, which is really important.
Yeah, I agree. And again, they've challenged themselves this year. We've talked about it every week. Coach Lechtenberg's playing a great schedule. They go on the road this week to take on undefeated Dartmouth. So, I mean, you've played Central Michigan, you've played UMass, you've played Yale. Now you're playing Dartmouth. I mean, Central Connecticut State and Merrimack, hat tip to those administrations. They clearly want to be good in football. They know that the best way to build a football program is to play in high-profile games, and they have done that. Of course, Merrimack played at Air Force, played at UConn, hosted Maine, hosted Dartmouth. I mean, kudos to them. And again, I think that's how you build a program when you're a lower-tier FCS school. You need to play in high-profile games to raise the visibility of your program. Central Connecticut State has done that this year. They got a big test on Saturday at Dartmouth. And by the way, if you're a freelancer in or around the Hanover area, we are looking for someone to cover that game. So if you're interested, reach out. You can message me on X, and you can also send over some writing samples to John, NEFTBJ at gmail.com. Send over your writing samples, and if you're interested in covering that game, we'll get you a credential. So we are looking for someone up in New Hampshire to cover Central Connecticut State at Dartmouth. Stonehill losing 31-7 to LIU. It was LIU's first win. It's been a tough season for Stonehill. Asher Karaha doesn't play in this one. They dropped to 1-4. They traveled to Merrimack on Saturday. But, going into the season, Ryan, I thought it could potentially be a long year for this Stonehill program. Really young at the skill positions, especially a wide receiver. They did bring back guys with experience along the offensive line. You had Karaha back at quarterback. You had, the 2 backs, Washington and Woodward. But young at receiver, young in the back end on defense. It has been a tough start to this season. For a Stonehill program that I think Coach Gardner and his staff have done a pretty good job getting acclimated to playing Division I football the last 2 years, it hasn't been the case this year. Again, I think their youth is starting to show up. And there's another program that had a lot of turnover this offseason.
Yeah, this is definitely tough because this is a Long Island team that, you're supposed to be these are the games you're hoping to win against, right? Although I
will say this, in their defense, they went toe-to-toe with URI.
Remember, I
believe URI beat them 28-21. So
right, like LIU has looked better this year. I will totally give them that, right? But I just think it's tough when, they only had 75 passing yards. It's just the fact they got gashed, right? 353 rushing yards allowed, and these are the stats when it looks like you're still a Division II team playing a new, Division I FCS team. So that's I think what's kind of just so striking compared to last year, despite the turnover. But just got to keep developing, and every week is an important rep to build towards next year.
Yeah, and of course, Stonehill travels to Merrimack this week. Merrimack coming off a 32-24 win over Morgan State. Big win there. Warriors improved to 2-4. They have an opportunity now on the back end of their schedule to build some momentum through the Warriors and finish strong. Of course, they're going to be playing for the inaugural Yankee Conference Cup against Sacred Heart to wrap up the season. But make no mistake about it, Coach Giannetti and his staff have done a really good job with this program. They've got them going in the right direction. They've played some pretty good football at times this year. They battled Maine, lost 26-15, lost by a field goal to Dartmouth. So this is a talented football team, and I think when you see them in games like this, they're starting to put it together.
Yeah, and I think it's exciting that where they've come, where they're going, and yeah, totally.
And finally, Sacred Heart loses to Howard 21-14. Pioneer started off well, took the lead early, played with the lead early, but unfortunately, their defense, which is their calling card, lets them down the stretch. They now fall to 3-4 on the season. And the Pioneers are back in action this week. They travel to Lafayette, which will be a tough game. Lafayette is 3-3, but one of the better teams in the Patriot League. So should be a pretty tough matchup for them. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the alma mater. UMass falls to Missouri 45-3. And in a game that for a little bit of I'm not going to say that I thought they were going to win, but there was a period of time, though, my friend, that I thought that they could potentially cover. I even went on 98.5, the Sports Hub, on Friday night and told my good buddy Joe Murray that they might be a sleeper play at 27.5. And if you're looking for a sleeper play, they might be a good one. And UMass crapped all over my pick. So you were there. You witnessed it firsthand. Could it have been worse than 45-3?
I think that was kind of right where it was, because I don't think Missouri's offense, like, for as good as they weren't dominant, So and I know that someone from Mizzou may spit on my face for saying that, right? But like, there were times where I just was like, oh, okay, like they're definitely very good, but they definitely let off the gas, I think, at a certain point. But no, I don't think it was a terrible play to say that, because UMass has done okay covering the spread against kind of bigger programs like that. But and you're not crazy, because there was a brief slip of hope, right, in that second quarter, right?
Yeah, it looked like that, if nothing else, they were going to probably lose by 21-24.
They get the field goal. They get a huge stop finally on defense. They convert the crazy awesome punt return, fake punt play. They've got the ball with a minute left. They're on the 10 or 7 yard line, and Tyson Pumachan throws into triple. I don't know what he was looking. It's almost like when he was playing the NCAA video game and he hit X, but he meant to throw it a Y. Like, it was literally like, where are you throwing? And the guy takes it back. They get a field goal. But it's just like, even if you get a field goal there, but let's just say they score, it's 21-10. You get the ball first to start the second half. It's a completely different game, right? And I think what's tough is in that first half, the defense had a hard time hanging in there, but the offense was able to somewhat move the ball. They just weren't consistent enough, right? And they took a bad penalty at the field goal range when they were down 14-0, but they were driving okay. It's just like, it's frustrating, because no one is going to sit here and say they had a chance at winning, but that's the difference, where we can sit here and say, yes, they got killed. There was a blowout. It's fair. No one is too surprised at that. You can't get mad that they got blown up by Missouri. You can't. I don't think it's pointless to yell at the AD for all these people for that game for that day, right? That's an expected result. But you had a chance to keep it close and you just couldn't, and that is where it's frustrating. And you're allowed to be mad at that, right? And that's where you're just like, why can't you be? Why can't you do these things? And it's just that's where I think people are just like bashing their head against the wall. You just can't take it at a certain point. So.
Well, and I mean, kudos to them that they were able to do this home and home with Missouri. Of course, UMass is going to go out there next year. The fact that Missouri was willing to come out here as an SEC school, I think says a lot about them. I mean, you got to remember now, people around here think that that's the sticks out there. Well, they think we're the sticks. So,
right.
Even
I will say, I was down on the sideline before the game, and I was trying to talk to a lot of Mizzou fans, and I also made the mistake of wearing my Auburn hat, which was really dumb, because they're playing Auburn next week, and Auburn has beat them twice in 2 SEC championships. Not a good call on my part. I took it off as soon as I got down there. But a lot of people, they were very nice. The Tiger fans were really great. They were so happy to be there. One guy told me that he drives to every away game, and he said that he's like, yeah, this isn't the best place I've been to, but I love how close I am to the action. I can't stand from me to you and see Eli Drinkowitz, right? And see Brady Cook and see these guys, Luther Burden, like see these guys as close, because I'm always so high up in my seat or whatever. So I think a lot of them kind of like the intimacy of it a little bit. I think they love I talk to people who love the foliage, Massachusetts in the fall, you can't beat, right? So I think everyone had a great time, especially that they kicked their ass. But I just think that element, is why I love and I wish more FBS teams would schedule games like that, because I just think it's so important for college football, and I think it's great for the fans. That's just my own personal take. They may not think that, right? There was a lot of jokes about stuff on Saturday, but that was what was, I think, really cool for me.
Well,
So,
and so that leads me to my next question. Do you see a scenario where UMass hosts another game like this?
I'd be hard pressed to think so. If it is, it's not going to be a team of that stature. I think, but if you keep up with these results, if you're, I don't know, let's just say TCU, right? Why wouldn't you come play here? You're going to get a free win. It's a nice new location. It's not Texas in the early, like late fall, early summer, whatever, where it's still hot. Like all the people that were like, we were at Texas A&M last week. It was 100 degrees. I love how comfortable it is. I got my sweatshirt on, so I don't know. I'd be hard pressed to think you might see like an AAC team or something like that, maybe BC again, but I think you'll never see that again. Personally, I think that's the only time.
I've been on record as saying I think BC, UMass, UConn should play each other every year.
Every single year, yeah.
And I've had people push back on that, and I'm like, why? Does BC need to play Duquesne? No.
Right.
With all due respect to Duquesne, they don't need to play Duquesne.
No.
Okay.
You should be playing us. And if you're so afraid, like, is it the one time UMass wins, is that really going to derail your program? I don't think so. So,
well, the thing that bothers me is they'll be quick to dismiss that idea. But what bothers me is UMass played Central Connecticut State this year in Wagner. One of those games could be BC.
Right.
BC played Duquesne. That could have been UMass.
Right.
I mean, UMass and UConn play, so that's a moot point. But I don't understand why BC can't play those two programs every year.
Right. Yeah.
UConn played Merrimack. They could have played BC in place of Merrimack. Like,
right.
I just, and I get it. If you're BC, you want to play higher profile games. You had Michigan State come to town. Fine. Fair point. But again, you're playing Duquesne. Like,
right. Those games should be a staple every year. And I hope that when UMass joins the MAC, I worry about losing the UConn game. I hope we don't. But it's, the fact that like we're not playing BC every year, every other year is silly. So it was a great experience.
They don't play each other in basketball either, so it's not
right. It was all around. It was a great experience. I think Ryan Bamford has some connections with the Mizzou AD or one of their people there. So shout out to them for getting the game. And no matter what the result was, I'm still trying to be like, there was an SEC team there, and that was pretty darn cool. So
yeah. No, I agree. And again, to your point, you may not see it again either. So
no.
You are watching the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Saranitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Ryan Barry. Just a reminder, if you're looking for a safe and effective protein powder to add to your workout routine, well, then give Yolked a try. At 47 calories per pack, it is tasty, delicious, and all natural. It's made with real egg yolk. So visit yolk.com today for more information. All right, let's talk games for this weekend and give our picks here in the final few minutes of the show. We're going to start with the big one tomorrow night. Boston College coming back off their bye, visiting Blacksburg, Virginia to take on Virginia Tech. Hokies are favored in this one by 7.5. That's a big number, especially when you consider that they're coming in at 3-3 and BC's 4-2. I think it shows you that Vegas is off the BC bandwagon, that the gloss is off the baseball card here a little bit. The over-under is 48.5. When I look at this game, look, it's no secret, Blacksburg, Virginia, going down there to play Virginia Tech. They come out to enter Sandman, tough environment, always a tough game. Boston College has gone down there and won in the past. Can they do it again?
I've been thinking about this, and I don't know. Like, I love that BC's coming off the bye week. I think they're probably pissed off after the Virginia game, and I think that all those are good points. But it's just like you said, under the lights, enter Sandman. They've, two of their losses this year only by 4 points to Miami, 3 points to Rutgers. Like, it's hard for me to see that, but I also wouldn't be surprised because BC can win these games, right? So. But I'm going to take Virginia Tech. It might bite myself in the ass, but I'm going to take the Hokies here just because of the intangibles of that make me more confident than BC going down there and getting it done after last week and 2 weeks ago, rather.
I'm going to take Boston College to cover, but I'm going to pick Virginia Tech to win. I think they win by 3. I think it's a 24-21 kind of game. Look, I think that loss to Virginia exposed some of Boston College's flaws, and now you had the bye week to fix some of those problems. But I mean, again, and Kevin Stone says this all the time, and I agree with him. Until Thomas Castellanos gives you more of a reason to believe that this offense can be explosive and make big plays, because he can make big plays in the passing game, it's hard to consistently pick Boston College. And I, like everybody else, bought into the Bill O'Brien hype. I didn't go as far as saying he's building a monster per se, but I definitely bought into the hype because I know Bill O'Brien and I know he's a really good coach. And I do think he is going to get BC past the traditional 6 or 7 win threshold. That being said, if they go down there and win tomorrow night, I'm not saying I'm back on the wagon, but I'll feel more confident about this football team. But when you lose the way they did to Virginia, and you almost lost to Western Kentucky, they have not played well in their last 2 games. I don't think a bye fixes that. I do think there's some carryover here. I think it's a close game, but I think ultimately Virginia Tech pulls it off. Again, as always, we hope we're wrong,
Right.
because we do root for the 16 Division I teams that we cover in New England. I know that that's not professional, but we do. But I think at the end of the day, I need to see a little bit more out of this Boston College offense, especially the passing game. All right, next up, UConn is in action this weekend. They're back after their bye. They continue their homestand. It's like we're covering the UConn baseball team. They're hosting Wake Forest, who comes into town 2-4. I think at the beginning of the year, when you looked at UConn's schedule, this was probably one of the games you thought that they could lose. Tough matchup at home. Didn't play great against Temple. They ended up winning 29-21. But nonetheless, the Huskies have had 2 weeks to get healthy, which they've needed. They are healthier. And they take on a Wake Forest team that's pretty well coached. Dave Clawson, Warren Ruggiero do a great job with that offense. But UConn has been a beast at home this year. They're favored by 1.5. It's tough to pick against the Huskies in this one.
Yeah, I've been, I'm excited to be there Saturday and listen to Coach Mora yesterday, and talked about how they're, like you said, getting healthy. It was really important on the bye week to kind of get everyone's mind straight. And I think I'm struggling picking this because I'm buying that the bye meant more to UConn than it did for BC. So I don't want to sound hypocritical, but I do feel like Wake Forest is a good team. That they've got a lot to like about them. I know that they're 2-4, but they lost by, or they beat North Carolina State by 4. They did get blown out by Clemson, but I'm going to go with Wake Forest here. I'm hopefully going to be surprised on Saturday, but it's the line is only 1, right? So it's kind of like a pick 'em in a way. So I'm just going to go with Wake Forest because it's hard. It's harder for me to see Wake Forest being 2-5 with the loss to UConn than it is the other way around, 5-2 for UConn. So,
yeah, I've been saying for weeks that I'm drinking the Kool-Aid and injecting into my veins and all this other stuff, and I am until they lose, and even then, I'm still going to be drinking the Kool-Aid. I think that this football team is going to. I've said it all along. They're going to capitalize on the 6-game homestand. They're going to end up bowl eligible. They got winnable games after this. If you win Saturday, their next 2 home games are Rice, Georgia State. I mean, they win Saturday. All they need to do is win one of those 2, and they're bowl eligible. So,
right.
And neither one of those programs are lighting the world on fire this season. So, yeah, and I know they went down and lost to Georgia State last year, but they've got them at home. And like I said, they've been beasts at home this season. I like UConn in this one. I think they cover. I think they win by 7. They win this one. Pretty big win. And as we've seen in the Jim Mora era, they've had some nice wins at home. You go back to Boston College, Liberty. They've had some nice wins at home. So I think that they can get this one. All right, next up, we're going to go over to the Ivy League. We got a Friday night game this week as well, Ryan. We got Brown at Princeton. Princeton off to a tough start. They're usually one of the favorites in the Ivy League, but they're off to a 1-3 start. Hosting a Brown team that's primed to go down there and potentially get a big win on the road in New Jersey. Bears have lost 2 in a row, but you know what? This isn't your older brother's Princeton Tigers. They're beatable. This is certainly a winnable game. DraftKings does have FCS lines, but they didn't put them out. We found that out last weekend, so couldn't find them on the DraftKings app. So we're going to keep making them up. Princeton is favored in this one by 3.5.
Yeah, this is Wow, this is a hard week. I'm going to go with Brown just because I don't think they're going to lose 3 straight weeks. I I think they still played decent enough last week. Princeton has struggled this year. Again, it's hard, looking at where Princeton could be with the loss would be kind of more surprising to me. So I feel like I'm going to kick myself, but I'm going to stick with my homerism and go with Brown and show that this is kind of like those. We may have struggled, but we're a better team, right? And we're improving. So give me Brown.
Yeah, I mean, we need to see more from this Brown offense. And
Yeah.
look, I said it 2 weeks ago after that Harvard game that you can't keep reliving this one after the game. You got to move past it. Once guys come in the next day on Sunday, it's on to Bryant and the rest of the schedule. And I don't want to say that they have been reliving it for 2 weeks now, but they clearly relived it the week they lost to Bryant. And while they got off to a good start last week, I just, when I look at this Brown team, I want to see that they've taken that next step in terms of their maturation, that they can win games like this. Okay, it's great that you beat Harvard, and it's a signature win, and it's one that people will remember for a while. But you got to play these other games, and you got to win these other games. And good programs can move on from a big win and say, "Great, that was fun. We'll remember that one as long as we live." But we're on to Bryant. They've got to have that "we're on to the next one" mentality, because right now, despite the fact that the program is better, they clearly don't have that mentality. I'm going Princeton here. I need to see more from this team. They are certainly capable from a talent perspective to go down there and beat this Princeton team, but I got to see more. I haven't seen it. I'm going Princeton here. All right, next up we have Harvard hosting Holy Cross in a double local. Holy Cross has won 2 in a row after beating Colgate and Fordham. Harvard has won 2 in a row after that Brown loss. They have beaten UNH and Cornell. Harvard is favored by 7.5 in this one. Look, that Harvard offense is explosive. Jaden Craig, Cooper Barkate, they got 2 backs in Shane McLaughlin and Xavier Bascon. I mean, they have plenty of skill here. This is going to be a tough matchup for Holy Cross. I'm going Harvard here.
Yeah, same. I think that win last week kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth with Holy Cross. So yeah, give me Harvard. I think they're going to keep rolling. But it also wouldn't surprise me if maybe last week was just kind of an anomaly, right, with Holy Cross. But I'm gonna go with the Crimson.
Yeah, and Harvard. Look, I think Andrew Orich and his staff have done a great job there after that loss. But a guy that's been an X factor for them, we talk a lot about their receivers, but Charles DePrima is a quarterback, but they're using him as an athlete. He's playing a little bit of quarterback, spelling Jaden Craig, but they're also using him in the slot. They're using him as a receiver. They're using him as a runner on jet sweeps. They're finding different ways to get the ball in his hands. He's been an X factor for this Harvard offense. I think he continues to be that. Look, Dan Kern's a terrific coach. He's going to win at Holy Cross, I promise you. But I think that it's his first year. They've lost a ton of talent from the last 2 years, talent that you can't replace in one recruiting cycle. I think that they're going to be in the mix in the Patriot League, but ultimately I think Harvard is a little too much here. Excuse me. Give me the Crimson in this one. All right, next up we have Lehigh visiting Yale. Bulldogs are favored by 6.5 in this one. Yale's coming in at 3-2. I'm sorry. Yale's coming in at 2-2. Lehigh's coming in at 3-2. Of course, Bulldogs coming off a tough loss to Dartmouth last week. I have them bouncing back this week. I think that their offense is starting to get going. I think the passing game is starting to get going. We know what Joshua Pitzenberger and those backs can do, but if they can continue to throw the ball the way they have the last couple of weeks, that young defense comes around, Yale will bounce back and be in the mix come season's end.
Yeah, I think that Lehigh's had a 3-2, couple of wins over a couple of NEC teams. They beat Princeton at home, lost a close game to Bucknell. So they are a decent team. So I really hope that Yale's not overlooking them, right? But I would hope that last week's loss does not cause a spiral and make them think, oh crap, like are we missing something here? Like, are we gonna be able to bounce back from this? But so hopefully they will. I think it's a very winnable game, and I think it's a game that they need to win because it's not going to matter to them in the Ivy League standings, but it will matter to them for momentum. It will matter to them for those reasons as well.
And finally, as we mentioned earlier, Dartmouth hosting CCSU this week in another double local. Look, Dartmouth's 4-0, and they've got it. They're feeling it right now. They are in the driver's seat in the Ivy League, albeit it's early. You still have 6 weeks left. But this CCSU team, we talked about this earlier, Ryan. They played a really tough schedule. They're not going to roll into Hanover and lay down and play dead here for Dartmouth. They're going to come to play. I mean, look, if they can establish Elijah Howard early, Brady Olson takes care of the football. We know what he can do in the passing game. He's dangerous. This CCSU team, I think they're good enough to go up there and get the upset. Dartmouth is favored in this one by 7.5. I'm going to go with the big green here. I think that they win and they cover that mythical number that we're making up. But CCSU is going to play them tough.
Yeah, this is something where I could see the score kind of being similar to UMass, right? Or even last week where Dartmouth runs away with it. It's 35-20, but the Blue Devils make it interesting. So I think that they're going to scheme up some stuff against Brady Olson. I think they'll force a couple turnovers and be okay. So, but yeah, we'll see if Jackson Proctor's back as well. So,
yeah, that'll be interesting. But nonetheless, as we saw last week, they're in pretty good hands there. All right, we're going to go over to the CAA. We got Villanova visiting Maine. Nova is favored in this one by 6.5. Of course, as we know, never easy to go up and play in Orono. Maine's been a pleasant surprise this year, as we've said all along. I think that they're buying into Coach Stevens and this staff. The offense has carried the day. Carter Peavy has really settled in at quarterback. All that being said, Villanova is a CAA blue blood. We know how good this program is year in and year out. They recruit at an FBS level. Maine's going to have their hands full here. I think that Maine hangs in there and plays tough. They'll get theirs on offense, but it's hard for me to pick them in this one. Villanova has a lot of weapons on offense. They're tough to match up against. I think Nova wins this by 7.
Yeah, I think that they win it by even a little bit more than that. So yeah, give me the Wildcats. Hopefully, Maine has done what they've done against a lot of the good teams they've played, Montana State, Delaware. They keep it close, and then maybe it kind of gets away from them. I just hope it's not a blowout from the start, but it'd be great if they could actually win one of those, though, right? Because it's like, how many times are you going to keep it respectable against these teams in the first half and the wheels fall off? So, I'll take Villanova in the points there, but I do hope the Blue Devils the Black Bears can keep it a little bit closer.
The Blue Devil Black Bears, yeah.
The Blue Devil, yeah.
All right, next up, the big one in the CAA this week, at least as far as we're concerned, URI at UNH. Wildcats are favored in this one. The mythical line, keep that in mind. They're favored in this one by -1.5. URI hasn't won up there in, 40 years. Is this the year that they snap that streak and assert themselves as a legitimate player in the CAA? Do they go up there and get it done?
I believe I was at this game 2 years ago, and it was a shootout. URI was winning the majority of the game, and then, the Wildcats came back and got the job done. So I kind of saw that mythical, they just can't win up there, right? And I'm going to stick with the Wildcats for that, even though I have a feeling this is why I don't gamble, because I stink. I always lose my money because I don't go with what I think. So I'm going to go with the Wildcats, but I will totally not be surprised.
You're spending all your time on GeoFinder or whatever.
Right? Yeah, I'm too busy trying to be. I'm
GeoGuessr.
Yeah, I'm too busy being dropped in Malaysia and having to figure out where it is exactly in Malaysia.
Yeah, you got to get back to Wakefield.
Yeah, right. So give me the Wildcats, but I think the Rams could win this one.
So you're taking UNH, even though you think the Rams could win it.
Yeah, it's stupid. I just can't pick against the fact that it's been a while since Rhode Island's won there, and just I think that UNH won dirty last week, and they needed to win a game like that, right? And I do worry about URI in some of these close games that they've played against teams that are talented, that aren't as talented as we think that they are. Whereas UNH has played games against teams that are talented, and they've been tough, but they've gotten the win, or they've kept it close, right, against Harvard. So that's kind of where my head is at for why I'm thinking UNH too.
This is a tough one for me, a real tough one, because in my heart, I want to go URI. I want this to be a special season for Jim Fleming's squad. It's tough, though. I think going up there and playing the Wildcats in Durham with that offense, like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. They won dirty last week. They're going to play much better on offense this week. Trust me. It's hard. It's really hard.
This is one of the least like excited I've been games to pick all season because this is where it
I think
starts to get
it
hard.
literally could go either way. And I think the world of both of these staffs. I think that both of these programs are well coached. I'm going to go Rams here. I think this is the year they finally snap the streak. Probably going to regret this because UNH is really tough at home week in and week out, year to year. But I'm going to go Rams. I think there's something special about this group. I think that us waiting for them to trip up and lose a game that's going to cost them a shot at winning the CAA and a possible at-large playoff bid, I don't know if that happens. I think this team is pretty special. I think when you look at their schedule after this, I mean, you go UNH, and then they come back home. They get a tough one next week against Maine. We'll be covering that one. Then they host Monmouth, which is also going to be a tough game. And then week 11, they go to Delaware. That's a game that could decide whether or not they stay in the CAA hunt. And in many ways, Delaware's not qualifying. They can't win the CAA or make the playoffs. But it could also impact their at-large playoff chances. And then they wrap up the season at home against Albany, who is 3-3 now. I said they were 1-3. They were 2-3 going into that Bryant game. But nonetheless, the schedule, I guess my whole point in bringing up the schedule is I think it's pretty manageable the rest of the way. Yeah, you got that Delaware game down there. That's going to be tough. But the rest of those games are certainly games that they can win. So if they find a way to win on Saturday, Ryan, this is a team that probably finishes, 9-2. And if you finish 9-2, I mean, that certainly keeps you in the hunt in the CAA, and it should put you in a pretty good spot to get an at-large playoff berth.
Yeah, it's really one of those that like I just keep thinking, who is this going to hurt more, right? Like who's like will it be UNH being like, oh, okay, maybe we're not as close to being there as we thought, or is it URI like, damn it, we tripped up again, right? So yeah, it's a tough one, right? And again, shout out to what UNH has done. I think what makes me think that too is their defense has improved this year, and that's what's been really important, right? Derek Gillick's got those guys playing really well, keeping games, keeping the team in games, not letting up huge explosive plays. Like that's the things that they struggled with last year at times, and you've seen them improve in a lot of those avenues. So
yeah. I did like your URI reaction. Damn it, we tripped up again.
Yeah, it's like Homer Simpson. Like you just step on a rake in front of you again.
Right.
So.
And next up, we have Brian at Monmouth. Monmouth is favored in this one by 6.5. Again, for all you degenerate gamblers out there, these are fake lines. We're making them up. If DraftKings puts them out during the week, we'll use their lines, but they didn't. Although you can bet on these games if you go to the All Sports search feature on the DraftKings app. They're not sponsoring us. I don't even know why I'm doing this, but you can gamble on FCS games. So there you go. Monmouth favored in this one by 6.5. Bulldogs, again, very inconsistent. 2 weeks ago, they go down in Providence, beat Brown in a shootout 42-35, come back home, lose a tough one 24-17 to Albany. Can they go down to Monmouth and win this one? Monmouth they're 3-3, but they're a hard team to figure out. 1 week, they look like they could be the best team in the CAA. The next week, they look like they're in the bottom tier of the conference. I don't know which Monmouth team is going to show up this week, but I think regardless, this might be a tall task for Brian to go down there and win.
Right. I mean, Derek Robertson's been awesome. He's really been a key catalyst in that team and keeping them in games. I mean, they beat FIU. I don't know. I know that's an FCS over FBS, but FIU is a really, really downtrodden program right now. I mean, your stadium sponsored by Pitbull, so I'm going to go with Monmouth here. I just think that Robertson's playing awesome, and even though it's away, I think it's going to be a tough game. It's going to be close, but then I think they'll pull away.
Stadium sponsored by Pitbull.
Crazy that it is, but yeah.
It is ridiculous. All right, couple minutes left here. We'll go rapid fire here. We already looked at Central Connecticut and Dartmouth. We've got Stonehill in Merrimack on Saturday at Duane Stadium, and another double local. Again, fake lines here, folks. Want to remind you of that. Merrimack favored in this one by 6.5. Of course, Warriors coming off a big 32-24 win over Morgan State. Stonehill limping in after a loss to LIU. Who do you got?
Definitely taking the Warriors. An exciting win last week. Really good in the kick return game. Aiden Pereira's solid, didn't do too much, but yeah, I'm gonna stay with the Warriors here.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Warriors here too. I mean, again, I think Stonehill on paper, they have enough experience in some spots, but not enough in others. It's proved to be the difference until those young receivers come along, until that young secondary plays better, until that defense collectively plays better. It's going to be tough to pick Stonehill. All right, next up we have Sacred Heart visiting Lafayette. The Leopards are favored in this one by 6.5. Pios coming off a tough 21-14 loss to Howard. They are currently 3-4 in the season, but that's kind of been this year for them. It's a roller coaster ride for Mark Knopfler's squad. One week they play well, the next week they don't. Now, the defense usually is pretty good. It's can they get enough out of the offense? Outside of that Georgetown game where they scored 40 points, the Sacred Heart offense hasn't really done anything this season. If they have any shot of going into Lafayette and winning this week, they're going to need 21 plus from that offense. Do you have faith that they can get it?
I do, only in the sense that, they lost, Lafayette lost to Georgetown. They were shut out by them, right? And, but they only lost by 11 to Columbia, who's had a great season so far, and they beat Monmouth. So
Columbia is kind of the forgotten team in the Ivy League. Well, at least by us, because we just focus on New England. But you're right, Columbia's off to a great start.
Right. And I'm going to go with Lafayette just because it's at home and because their body of work, I think, is stronger. But losing 17-0 to Georgetown last week, who Sacred Heart had a good game against, gives me hope. But I'm just going to go with Lafayette because I just like what they've done more. So,
yeah, I agree. I'm going to go Lafayette here as well. I think this Sacred Heart offense leaves a lot to be desired, and I think that'll be the difference here. I think their defense will play well enough for them to be in this game and possibly win it in the fourth quarter. But we got to see way more out of that Pioneers offense. Like I said, very inconsistent. Did we forget anybody?
I don't think so.
I think we got them all. We got them all. Want to make sure we get them all because, like I said, we do take pride in covering all 16 D1 programs in New England on a week-to-week basis if we can. All right. Final thoughts here before we wrap it up.
Really excited to get down to UConn this weekend. Really excited that UMass is on a bye. Beautiful weekend coming up weather-wise. Like this.
Now, why are you excited that UMass is on a bye? Because you don't have to be tortured, or because you're going to get to play more GeoGuessr when you get home from UConn?
I think both. I think it's both, right? I mean, and selfishly, I'm not saying this because I don't care about this stuff, but like my birthday's Sunday, so that's nice. So
nice.
Have a little brunch, watch the Patriots, and Drake May get his first win against the Jaguars. So I'm excited. Those are my overall thoughts. Yeah.
Excellent. Ryan Barry excited to be turning 21.
Yes.
Will have his first drink.
Yeah, plus 10, unfortunately, now, which is horrifying to say. But yeah.
Well, guess what? In February, I'll be 50. So you 31 and 50. I mean, I would take 31 over 50 any day of the week. So
that's fair. Yeah.
There you go. Well, great job as always, brother. It's always great to see you and talk college ball with you. And we're looking forward to your work on Saturday. Like you said, you're going to be down at the Rent covering UConn Wake Forest for us. And as always, I know that you'll do a great job in that one. So looking forward to your story on that one. And hopefully it's a UConn win. That'll do it for this week's episode of the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm John Saranitas for my partner, Ryan Barry. Until